welcome once again to EWTN's Bookmark. I'm Doug Keck, your host. Our guest author is Edward Sri, author of Love Unveiled, published by Ignatius Press and available through the EWTN Religious Catalog at our website, EWTNRC.com. Great to see you here.
Good to be back again.
People see you over the years here on EWTN, several series, lots of books. You've been on Jeanette Benkovic's show recently and also many times on various live shows. What do you like best to do? You're a teacher. You started off with that way. You're involved with Symbolon, the Augustine Institute. Do you like to write books? Do you like to teach? What do you like to do the most?
Oh, that's a tough question. My background actually, Doug, was in journalism. That was my undergraduate degree in journalism and business, and I worked for a while in the corporate world doing public relations for a large corporation, and I got involved in radio and television and writing and designing, so I think communicating. I was working for a big chemical company, Dow Chemical, where we had to explain complex chemical processes to the average layperson. And I'm not a chemist, I stink at science. And so it was really hard for me. But I think, actually that exercise of how do you explain that to the average layperson is what I try to do with the Catholic faith. How do you take these complex doctrines and mysteries of the faith and make them come alive, understandable, so people can then love Christ more and love their faith more.
Right.
So writing and the video thing that we've been doing at the Augustine Institute with our various programs like Symbolon and Beloved and others are just great joy. So,
Well, let me ask you too. Some of your past books, Queen Mother, A Biblical Study of Mary's Queenship, Dawn of the Messiah, Men, Women, and Mystery of Love, Walking with Mary and the Advent of Christ. It seems to be, for you yourself, do you feel especially close to Our Lady?
Yes. Well, the way I would like to say it is a priest I know that says it like this. He says, I asked him once about, his devotion to Mary, and he says, I don't know how devoted I am to her, but I know she's very devoted to me. and I think that's been the case. I mean, I love Our Lady, and I often turn to her many times throughout my day and throughout my life. But I've sensed that she's been very devoted to me, and I'm so grateful. And I would have never planned to have my career be about very much writing often about Mary, teaching about Mary. It kind of just one thing led to another, and I'm so grateful.
Right. That seems to be the way many times it happens. Now, Love Unveiled, the Catholic Faith Explained. We talked about something called Symbolon. Now, some people watch EWTN, might be familiar with it. Some people in various parishes might be familiar with it. What is it, and what's its relationship to this book?
Okay, so the Augustine Institute, we develop a lot of programs for parishes to use for meeting all their catechetical needs. And the first and kind of central program we have is called Symbolon, the Catholic Faith Explained, which is a walk through the entire faith. It's being used in over 4,000 parishes, all 50 states and around the world now for RCIA, but also for a lot of men's and women's groups, Bible studies, catechist formation. So it's really taking off in parish life today. We filmed in Rome, the Holy Land, Calcutta, India, in our studios in Denver, and brought a whole team of people together to teach it. So I served as the host, but it's not just me. It's me with people like Dr. Tim Gray, a lot of our other professors, Curtis Martin, Chris Stefanik.
Many people have seen on EWTN over the years as well,
so all of them came together, and we thought, what can we do to really unpack the Catholic faith for people, to draw people in? And the stories we're hearing tons of conversion stories, Doug, from people who have been hostile to the faith to people who've been just agnostic and indifferent, and a lot of reversion stories. A lot of people have been away from the church, or maybe they go every once in a while to Mass, and they're going through a great conversion from the program. So we want to develop a book that would kind of do the same thing, to kind of go out, present the faith, but particularly what we did in Symbolon, what we tried to do in the book, is engage the culture. I often like to say when we teach.
When we say that, and many of us say that, we say we need to engage the culture. When you say that, what do you mean?
Well, I mean it in many ways, but in the context of this book, and in the context of the Symbolon series, what I mean is this, is when we're passing on the faith, whether it's formally I'm a teacher or a catechist, or in my own home as a parent, I'm passing on the faith, it's not enough for me just to give good Orthodox doctrine. I've got to be aware of the cultural environment and address it with my children and with the people I'm serving. I tell a little story often about how I'm a horrible gardener, but I had some raspberry plants in my backyard, and one summer it was really dry, so I kept adding more water and water and water, but the plants just kept doing worse, but all these little white flowers kept growing up around it. And I kept adding more and more water because there was no rain that summer, and I thought, why are my plants not doing well? I keep giving it water, until I realized every time I added water, more of these white little flowers grew, and those were something called bindweed.
Okay.
The weed that goes around the plant and chokes the life out of it.
Oh, I see, okay.
and I think what's important is it's not enough just to give water. You got to be aware of the soil and what weeds are out there. And the same is true when we're teaching the faith, when we're teaching our CA, or when we're passing on the faith to our kids, it's not enough just to go, here's your orthodox doctrine. That we need to do that, absolutely, but we got to do more. We got to realize there are all these weeds out in the culture, certain mindsets, certain attitudes, ways of looking at life that will choke the life out of the faith of our children.
As our Lord talked about in the parable.
Exactly.
As well. Right.
Exactly. And many times I think we as catechists or parents, we just think, well, I just got to give them the faith. And that's good, but I've got to get them to be armed so that when they encounter in high school or college or just watching television, all these other views of love, life, marriage, sexuality, morality in general, when they encounter the secular world, they're armed for that.
Right.
Not just the doctrine, but engage the culture in that sense.
And in a sense, the way to realize that this is the truth, but realize other people will contradict it, and you need to understand and not be surprised when somebody comes up with a differing opinion. That this isn't the only way that people think about it.
Yep. And simply saying, well, you have to believe this because the Bible says so, the church says so. I mean, we believe in faith, those things, right? But at the same time, we want to prepare our children. We want to prepare the people so that when they are engaging their peers or the secular world, they're armed intellectually. They have their noses out ready to go, oh, I've heard that false idea before.
Right, and they don't know how to respond. Now, at the beginning of the book, you say, with gratitude to 3 teachers who were also witnesses. You mentioned Scott Hahn, Barbara Morgan, and a Father Paul Murray. Who's Father Paul Murray? And when you say witnesses, what do you mean?
Okay, that's an allusion to Paul VI in his document on evangelization. He talks about how the world listens not to teachers, but to witnesses. And if they're ever going to listen to teachers, it's because they also are witnesses, meaning they don't just have the right doctrine, they're not just effective pedagogy, good pedagogy, but they actually are embodying the faith that they're teaching. So those are 3 people that influenced me very much. Scott Hahn was one of my professors very early on in my academic life and has formed me in so many ways. I'm so grateful to Dr. Hahn. And Barbara Morgan is someone who formed me not so much theologically, but catechetically. How do we pass on the faith in catechesis, the art of teaching for conversion, good methods in parish settings? Father Paul Murray was one of my professors in Rome. He's a great Dominican priest. Was my spiritual director. He was a priest that taught me so much about the wisdom of the spiritual tradition and all the great saints. So he's a dear friend and a great man.
Let me ask you a question. Symbolon, we hear the name. What does it mean, and how come that became the name?
Oh, the name for the video program,
right,
Symbolon.
Exactly.
Okay, well, Symbolon, it's described in the Catechism as the ancient Greek word that was used by the earliest Christians to describe the creed. Now, what was a Symbolon? A Symbolon was like some kind of token, say like a clay medallion, that when broken in half and brought back together would confirm someone's identity in a relationship. So let's say I wanted to leave $1,000 in your bank. We take a clay medallion, break it in half. You keep one half, I keep the other. I come back a year later and say, hey, Doug, can I get my $1,000? How do you know it's really me? We put the clay medallion together. I have the other half. Oh, it matches up. So it confirms my identity and our relationship.
I see.
So the early Christians, when they wanted to discern, how do I know this is the true faith? How do I know this is what Jesus really taught or what the apostles really taught? They turned to what they called the Symbolon, the creed, the summary statement of our faith. And the idea was that it brought me in communion, in union with that apostolic faith, and it confirmed my identity. I believe the right things. I live according to these things. That's what brings me into that communion of apostolic faith.
And if you met another person who claimed to be a Christian, you could tell whether they really were by what they believed from a creed perspective.
Exactly. And in our day and age, where there's so many different views about God and spirituality and morality, how do I really know what Jesus really taught and what God really wants for us? We go back to the Symbolon, to the creed.
Right.
And that's what we try to do in the video series, is present the faith in a timely way so that it addresses modern men and women and brings them into that historical faith.
Right in the beginning of the book, the introduction, you say, if you were to walk into a coffee shop and randomly ask people, do you like coffee?
I like coffee.
Okay.
Yeah.
What does the Catholic Church stand for? What kind of responses do you think you would receive? Have you ever tried that?
I haven't tried that yet, although I almost did. I almost asked somebody at the grocery store, actually, this question, because I've been giving a lot of talks on this. I often use this anecdote. I asked them, what do you think people would say? They're mostly going to say things like, oh, the Catholic Church, what it stands for, it's against abortion, it's against contraception, it's against gay marriage, it's against women. That's the world's impression of the Catholic Church. Is anybody ever going to say something like this? The Catholic Church stands for the God who is love, who is madly in love with you, who has a plan for you, who died for you, who wants to forgive you. No one says that out there in the world. And sadly, within our own pews, Doug, many Catholics don't think of that. They just think of all the moral rules. What we have to see is that all those moral rules flow from God's loving plan for us, because love is at the very center of all that we live and do and believe as Catholics.
And when you talk about, and the reason the title is Love Unveiled is because you really talk about your own journey. In a sense, you started from a kind of a good person, Sunday Catholic, to realizing it's a whole way of life, and ultimately understanding the way of love, a most profound love that world itself does not offer. And that's the love that's being unveiled from our Lord.
Yeah, I think in my life, I grew up in a good Catholic home. My mom's was a very good Catholic, and I went to church on Sundays, and I prayed every once in a while. I wanted to be a good guy. But as I went off to college, there were many other things that were much more important to me. Having fun, getting a good career, all these other distractions. But I also got all these questions, whether it was from fundamentalist Christians or especially from the secular world. Isn't one religion just as good as another? Why do you Catholics have to talk about all these moral issues? Don't impose your morality on me. And I remember, well, maybe, I don't know, is the Catholic thing really true? And thanks be to God, the Lord put good friends, some good priests, some good books into my life that helped me to see, the Catholic faith doesn't just make sense, like logically as a doctrine, but it makes sense as a way of life,
right.
and a way of love. We're made for love. And the Catholic Church, in all of its teachings, is showing us, here's the pathway to grow in that love. And so everything we teach isn't about, I want you just to follow some rule. It's that we love that person over there, and we love them so much, we want them to be happy. And we know the way that they're living is not going to lead them to their happiness.
Right.
And that's why the Church proclaims the moral teachings.
Well, it's interesting, too, because we think of our present Holy Father with the idea of encountering an accompaniment. It seems to be that sometimes where everybody's up on the encounter, the accompaniment they get a little lost on what exactly that means. The idea that, yeah, God loves you just the way you are, where you are, but He doesn't want to leave you there, right?
Exactly. I mean, that's the image of, the Holy Father uses. He talks about the parable of the lost sheep, parable of the lost coin. The idea is that we're going out and we're going to go meet these people where they are. We're going to love them even in the midst of their very messy lives, At the same time, the accompaniment isn't just a random, accompaniment. It's going somewhere.
Right.
We're leading, we're loving them where they're at, so that then by investing our lives in them, we can lead them to the fullness of the gospel.
Now, you talk about in the section Encountering Christ, the head and the heart, you say, in this book we walk through the big picture of the Catholic faith, from creation, the cross, and the church, to the sacraments, Catholic social teachings, sexual ethics, to purgatory, the papacy, and prayer. How do you fit that all into this book?
Well, the Church has given us a great guideline. It's called the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Yeah. That I'm following the outline of the Catechism, which goes from the Creed, sacraments,
say that's your
morality,
itinerary,
and prayer. That's my itinerary for the book.
Using,
but
right?
well, why? Sometimes the Catechism can just be like a long manual. What I'm trying to do is then kind of digest the key elements of the Catechism. But I want to go back to what we said earlier. What I'm also trying to do here is address all these matters of faith in light of the cultural questions that are out there. Because I hear from so many parents and grandparents that will say things like, I sent my kids to Catholic school, or I was Orthodox and gave them good training, and they were confirmed, and then they didn't get married in the church, or now they don't really believe, or now they're wondering, why do I need a church, Mom? I believe in God. Can't I just be spiritual on my own? So in the chapter, I have a chapter that's on ecclesiology, theology of the church. But I don't call it theology of the church. You know what the name of the chapter title is? It's Why Do I Need a Church?
Right.
Because that's the question so many people have today. And so we need to go after why is a
Right.
church necessary? Just maybe on that point.
Right.
I meet a lot of people that will say that, I'm spiritual, I'll make up my own spirituality, I'm a good person. Well, the word for church I bring out in the book is the word ekklesia, which is rooted in Greek, that means to call out of, ekkalein, to call out of. It originally described God calling Israel out of Egypt, out of slavery, and Christ uses it to describe how we need to be called out of our limited horizons, limited perspectives, our own selfishness. And I know myself, if I just made up my own spirituality, it would be comfortable for me, it would be doing my interests, what's my preferences. But I'm not really going to be challenged. I know myself. I need a standard outside of myself calling me out of myself, ekkalein.
Well, why
That's
is
the
that
church.
any different than if you went to school and they said, well, just learn what you feel like learning when you feel like learning it, whatever you're comfortable with, without having any standards or what time you're supposed to show up for school or how you're supposed to dress, any kind of standards to do these things, and you just wander around on your own. Yeah. Unfortunately, what happens is that approach tends to hurt the most the people who need it the most. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because they're the ones who are going to tend to wander the furthest. Yeah. There are some who survive on their own because they've got that self-motivation or it just connects. But it's the ones who are going to wander who need the biggest structure. And what else in life, health or anything else, is there not a set of ideas that one should follow if one wants to succeed? You say the increasingly secular, relativistic, and individualistic attitudes around us can affect the way we think about God, life, love, and happiness. And that fits right into what you said with the church, because part of it does become, well, if God loves me just the way I am, and God is all merciful, what's the problem? As long as I don't feel, the only reason I feel guilty is because you make me feel guilty. And since I'm okay with it, that must be my conscience, right? I mean, if I'm doing what I want to do and it doesn't bother me, doesn't that mean I'm following my conscience?
Yeah, and that's a shame that that's where the world is today. And what that leads to is I'm not called out of myself if I buy into that logic. So I have these little guilty feelings, but then I suppress them because I just want to do this. What I end up with, I end up actually not growing in life. I don't grow in love. I become a slave to my own selfishness, a slave to my own lifestyle, instead of being called on to greatness. This is the beauty of what the church does. The church calls us out of that, and at Killeen again, and reminds us that, hey, you do feel guilty about that. Why do you feel guilty about that? And guilt isn't all a bad thing. It's a sign that you know you did something wrong, but there's a part of you that doesn't like that. That's a noble thing, that guilty feeling. And the church is inviting you, come bring that to confession, and God will forgive you.
Well, it fits in. I always remember someone talking about the fact that they had these terrible pains, in particular, like in their hand, and they said, well, why don't you just cut the nerve endings off so you don't feel the pain? Well, the reason the nerve endings are there aren't there to make you feel pain. They're to let you know there's a problem, that there's something wrong that needs to be fixed. And if you don't have that, then you may not know that there's a problem. You know, you could be burning your hand off without realizing that there's a problem. And if you don't have that kind of idea of a guilt feeling or something else to realize maybe there's something going wrong here, then you may not be aware that the path that you're going down and what the detriment might be.
Absolutely, and what people do when they try to just cover up their guilt, which is what the modern culture does, it's not just that they're going to be persisting in sin. That's something wrong, yes, but they're just not going to be happy. They're going to live lives that are going to be closed in more on themselves. The relationships aren't going to be very healthy. There's going to be an empty ache in their heart because they're still human persons. No matter how secular someone is, no matter how much they claim, I don't need a church, I don't need a God, God made them, and He made them for Him. And so when they're not living according to that plan, there's a part of them that there's an ache in their soul, a longing for something more. What I'm trying to do in this book is draw out that ache, to draw out that hunger, or as Augustine said, that restlessness, that God made us for Him, and our hearts will be restless until they rest in Him.
Rest in Thee. And this book, as you say, thus aims to form not just the head, but also the heart in what you're talking about. The other thing that struck me too here, and that's always been important over the years, I remember Father Mitch did a book on this years ago, a series back in the early 90s, Who Do You Say I Am? And the whole idea of how important it is for us to understand who is Christ, really.
Yeah, we live in a world today where many people say all religions aren't they just the same? You know, we're all just different. You know, people climbing up, making our own path up the one mountain to God, but we just make our own path. And that makes sense if you believe in like a God that's passive and just way up there and not involved, like the Bette Midler God. Remember that song from the 90s, From a Distance, God is watching us, No, God isn't up from a distance. We believe that God loves us. He's not a passive God, that He actually interacts in this world. And if we believe in a God that loves us and can interact in this world, which just makes sense. It doesn't make sense to say God can't interact in the world He created. So if that makes sense, that God would come and interact with us, then there are some paths that are going to be better than others. And Jesus came as the Son of God. God didn't just talk to us by sending prophets and sending commandments on tablets of stone. He actually became one of us. And He claimed to be the way, the truth, and the life. So it doesn't mean that other paths up the mountain are all bad, right? The other world religions
some of the truth.
Can have some elements of truth to it, right? But if you want to know the sure path, the one that has the fullness of grace and truth, it's the one that God came and sought out. And so I quote in the book this little line from Peter Kraft. He says, I mentioned this here, he says, if God made the road, we must find out whether He made many or one. And if He made only one, then the shoe is on the other foot. It is humility, not arrogance, to accept this one road from God. And it's arrogance, not humility, to insist that our man-made roads are as good as God's God-made one. and so I think this chapter is now taking that a step further and looking at Jesus is the God-made road. This is His way, and so we want to follow it.
Right, and that's where you fit into the whole thing of I will not serve, that basically though this is what I'm going to do it the way I want to do it. I got to be me. Who do you say? I'm going to say what is most striking about Jesus' teaching is that he makes himself the central issue of faith. Other religious leaders in the world claim to be a spiritual teacher or messenger sent from God. Buddha offered a spiritual way to find inner tranquility. Muhammad claimed to be Allah's prophet. Confucius taught moral principles to live a balanced life. But Jesus doesn't just offer a way to God or truth about God. He makes himself the essential issue of the faith, like you said. And that's where he can be so problematic for people.
Yeah, because Jesus doesn't just, other world religious leaders, they're like a prophet or a messenger. I'm a teacher. I'm showing you the way. Jesus says, I'm the way. Jesus doesn't say, here, believe these teachings about God. He says, believe in me. He claims to be God. And that challenges us, the famous C.S. Lewis argument, right? If Jesus claimed to be God, then you have to make a choice about him. You have to either say, he is who he said he was, and then that has dramatic implications for my life. I have to follow him. Or I reject him. The one thing that modern man likes to do is they like to say, oh, Jesus is a good man, and I'll take, some of his teachings. But he's just one of many religious teachers. And that's the one thing Jesus won't allow us to do. Because he either is God, because he claimed to be God, or he's, if I walked around saying, hey, Doug, I'm God, you'd go, all right, we're not having you on the show anymore. Dr. Shree's gone crazy.
There you go.
Or I'm a liar, right? And so you can't say I'm a good man. You can say I'm a crazy man. You can say I'm a liar. But you can't say I'm just a good man. Jesus challenges everyone to make a choice. What will you do? Do you accept him as Lord, or will you reject him? And that's what evangelization is about. It's pushing that issue and not letting modern man and woman kind of settle in this gray zone of, oh, he's a good man, I'll pick and choose what I like.
Now, in your section that's later on in the book where we talked a little bit about why do I need the church, you talk about one of the most significant breaks from this unity, talking about the unity of the church itself, came in the 1500s, the anniversary is coming up, when Martin Luther and what has been called the Protestant Reformation. This represented a rupture on all three levels of belief, worship, and apostolic succession. Do you see any of that happening today? I mean, obviously we see the splintering many times of the Protestant denominations. We see kind of a lackluster future of some of the mainline Protestant situation. What do you see for the Catholic Church ourselves in some of these things?
Do you mean in terms of might there be future breaks?
Right,
within?
exactly, right.
I that's an interesting thing, and I pray not, because unity is so important, but when, I would say you may see in some sectors of the church people saying, well, this apostolic succession thing, is it really that important,
Right.
or there are many Catholics that don't really believe the sacraments are important, right? They don't go to Mass regularly. The majority of Catholics aren't going to Sunday Mass every Sunday. So they have not maybe broken, heretically proclaiming that these things aren't important, but they, in their own lifestyle,
kind of a de facto situation.
They're cutting themselves off from the rich sacramental life of the church. They're cutting themselves off from the heritage of apostolic succession and the wisdom on how to live life and the teachings of Christ that brings us. So, I pray that there's not a formal, kind of a break again, but we are living in a time where there's a lot of confusion.
Right, and a lot of pressure. You also make the point that it is clear from the very beginning that this new approach, talking about the Protestant approach, would not work. Why was that so clear from the very beginning?
One of the key elements of the Protestant Reformation was the idea of sola scriptura. Everybody, I'm just going to go to my Bible, and the Bible alone is the sole source of authority. And so that was a key tenet for Luther and the original Protestants. And so if you look right away in the very first generation, when people were using that principle of sola scriptura, the Bible alone, you have Luther believing one thing about the real presence, you have Calvin believing something else, you have Zwingli believing something else, you have Melanchthon believing something else. All those, in the very generation of Martin Luther's life, they're arguing with each other about in what sense is Christ present in the Eucharist. And that's because they're all just trying to go to the Bible alone. And so today we know there's like tens of thousands of different Protestant denominations all claiming, well, the Bible says this, no, the Bible says this. They all disagree with each other. Christ didn't come and just give us a Bible. He gave us a church, because you need the church to interpret this sacred text. It was never meant to be read in an individualistic sense, just me and the Bible. It was always meant to be read in the context of a tradition and in the context of the authority of the church that Christ gave us through Peter and the successors to interpret this text properly.
It's interesting. I was thinking in terms of the whole sola fide thing, and I think about the idea of moral relativism today. It's kind of like we have our sola morality or something, where each of us is defining our own morality for ourselves.
Yeah, and I have a whole, that question about relativism permeates all throughout the book. It comes out especially in a chapter I have on the Catholic moral worldview. because that's our day and age today, right? You know, you can have your truth, I can have my truth, but there's no the truth to which we're all accountable. Don't impose your morality on me. I make up my own morality. Here's the challenge with that view, is that it's kind of like the idea, why do I need a church? Same thing, why do I need morality? If I'm always making up my own morality, I'm going to tend to just use it to justify my own lifestyle, my own preferences, the way I treat my wife, the way I treat my kids. You know, so in a relativistic world, if a man wants to just leave his wife and leave his children and go off with some other woman, the relativist can't say that that's wrong. Well, if that's what he wants to do, if that's fine for him, then great. If somebody wants to just go, you know, hijack airplanes and go them into the World Trade Center, you can't say that that's wrong. You just say, well, hey, you know, I applaud the terrorists' free choice because they made a choice for themselves. That's what you end up with. And so lives can be really hurt and ruined when you have moral relativism. God gave us a moral law because he wants us to be happy. He knows how he works. He knows that if you are faithful in your marriage and you're heroic, even in difficult circumstances, that's where you're going to find your fulfillment in life. Right, exactly, and it's really lamp unto my feet. We only see so much ahead, and we have to trust in the Lord that he's taking us on the right path. Well, thank you so much, Ed. It was always great to have you here. Just ask you before I go, another book in the works? Yeah, I've got a couple things in the works. I'm working on a book on the virtues, looking at the virtues as the art of living, kind of like what we're talking about here, that God made us to live a way of life that leads to happiness. I'm going to walk through the virtues and the great tradition of St. Thomas Aquinas. Sounds good. I'm sure you'll stop by the next time. Thank you so much. Talking with Edward Sri, author of Love Unveiled, The Catholic Faith Explained, published by Ignatius Press, available through the EWTN Religious Catalog. Go to www.ewtnrc.com. Check it out. Join us next time right here on Bookmark.